Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Danket dem Herren, which translates to Thank the Lord. It's a short chorale today, maybe a contender for the shortest chorale we've looked at so far. All in all, very straightforward chorale. There's one little section where there is some ambiguity, but it's not too much to write home about. Let's just hop right into the analysis. So, no key signature. We start on A minor, we end on A major. I reckon the overall tonality of this chorale is A minor, and I make the argument that it doesn't even modulate, but there's a little section here that could potentially result in some people analyzing a modulation. I think both analyses are correct, it's just a little ambiguity going on. So we start off with our tonic, A minor, and then we move again to A minor, A, E, A, and C, just respelled so we don't need to reanalyze. Lower suspension here in the bass, G sharp, E, B, and B spells E major over G sharp, that's 5-6, and that takes us right back to A minor, A, E, B, and C. But this B is a 9/8 suspension over the bass, but still our tonic is being implied. 1-5-6-1 is a staple opener for Bach in the chorale, so it's a likely chord progression we'll see. And then we get B, D, A, and D. This starts the ambiguous section here. This A is another suspension over the bass. This time it's a 7-6 suspension, but the chord that we get is not G sharp diminished, but rather G major over B, which is 7-6. Oop, that 7 looks a little wonky. There we go. Sometimes we see 7-6 analyzed as 5-6 of 3. That's how the first textbook I studied from analyzed it. And that's typically because subtonic 7th chords have more of a likeliness to resolve to 3. C, D, G, and E. And in this case it does. It analyzes. It resolves to C major, C, C, G, and E. Of course the bass does change here, but this is a contrapuntal situation where Bach moves to C major and he just changes the bass by the time we get the resolution. This B is also a non-chord tone. It's a little decorative neighbor tone here. But C major is the 3 chord in the key of A minor, and the reason why we have some ambiguity here is because we spend quite a long time proportionate to the length of the chorale focusing on C major here, because the next chord we get, which we would expect to be, I don't know, a 6 chord or a 5 chord or even a tonic triad, is another C major chord, E, C, G, and E, which is just taking our 3 chord and inverting it. So we're spending 2 beats on C major, another passing tone in the bass, and then we get G major again, G, B, G, and D, which is another 7 chord, or I guess 5 of 3, but in this case it doesn't make as much sense because it's not resolving to 3, it's resolving to 1 after this passing 7th in the alto, A, B, E, and C. This time a 2-1 suspension over the bass. Still our tonic triads being implied. So as we can see here, 7 often goes to 3, or subtonic 7th often goes to 3, but sometimes subtonic 7th goes to 1, and when it does go to 1, it's sort of like Bach borrowing chord progression from like an older tradition where the leading tone didn't really play as much of a a progressional role and played a much stronger cadential role to point towards what was being tonicized or finalized, whatever pitch was being focused. Leading tones were used to establish finality, as opposed to in tonality where they do that at a much more wide, or I guess macro level or micro level, where they're happening, you know, in between chords, and we see leading tones basically baked into the scale as an equally treated chord tone or scale degree. But here I think there's an argument to be made that we do move to C, and if that's the case, this would be a 5-6 chord, this would be 1 chord, 1-6, 5, and then maybe this A minor chord would be 6 and our gateway back to the key of A minor in time for our cadence. E, A, E, and B is a 5 chord, E major with a 4-3 suspension in the tenor. This G sharp is our chord tone. This F sharp is a lower neighbor. And then we have E, G sharp, E, and B just in time for our half cadence on E major. Second phrase is also in the key of A minor, ends in a perfect authentic cadence though. Sorry, I'm moving something off frame so I have space to write. We start the phrase off with another E major chord. E, G sharp, E, and B, so we don't need to reanalyze. And then we have a passing seventh in the bass before we get C, A, E, and E, which is A minor in first inversion. We then have C, A, F sharp, and D, which is D7 over C sharp. That would be a harmonization of the melodic minor scale, no secondary dominance going on here. That would make this a 4-4-2 chord. And if we see a 4-2 chord, we typically can make an educated guess about where it would resolve. And we're typically moving down a fifth as far as the root is concerned, and the bass is moving down by step. So B, B, G sharp, and D, we would expect it to go to a 7-6 chord, and that's exactly where it goes. Something that's very consistent in Bach is the way that he treats 4-2 chords when they do come up. And we would expect 7-6 to go to 1, C, C, A, sorry, A, C, A, and C. It's a 2-root, 2/3 spelling, but still a tonic triad nonetheless. We then move to E, E, A, and B, another E major chord with a 4-3 suspension. It seems like Bach has made somewhat of a theme of that 4-3 suspension over the dominant triad. And then we have A, E, A, and C, which is our A minor triad, our tonic triad here in the key of A minor. Passing seventh in the bass before we get F, D, A, and D. It's D minor over F, which is a 4-6 chord. Neighbor tone here in the alto before we get E, E, A, and C. This is A minor in second inversion. Kind of interesting to see it here metrically because we would typically expect it here, but we're seeing it a beat early. And 1-6-4 typically functions as a predominant chord, sort of as an accessory to 5, but here we're seeing it used as a passing chord to another predominant chord that will take us to 5. So interesting that that chord gets chosen here. Maybe Bach felt compelled to use it because of the melody, and you know, he has his reasons, but it's really not that big of a deal. When you've looked at Bach in the detail that I have up until this point, it's little things like this that stick out that are otherwise pretty benign in the great deal, and like the great big picture of the chorales in general. But afterwards we get D, F, A, and B, which is B minor 7 flat 5 over D. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords in cadential situations. And then we have E major, E, E, A, and B, again with that 4-3 suspension over the bass. And we have this delayed seventh here in the tenor before we get A major, A, C sharp, E, and A. Bach often ends his chorales, or at least his minor chorales, with a major tonic triad because of, I guess I actually don't have a complete like codified, verifiable answer, but the majority of the time he does, and I think it has to do with ending on a more uplifting tone, or just the overall relationship with major triads having a stronger sense of finality. So ending the chorale with it might have might be the point of making it feel like it's indicating to the audience that there is an end, and it's happening here because it's different from the other minor cadences you'll hear throughout the chorale. But all in all, it's mostly speculative. What I do know is that the majority of the time in minor chorales, Bach cadences on a major tonic triad. But I'm going to end the video off on that note. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. If you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can hit the notification icon as well to be notified of my daily upload, and like the video if you enjoyed the content. It helps me out a ton as a content creator. And again, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.